Thanks, Emma. That was quick. um, yeah, that sounds like a pretty honest and authentic response and process, as usual. I guess the first thing I'll say is both men and women have a evolutionary, historical, and cultural role and expectation in marriage or in committed relationship. The woman's could be described as to serve and obey, or serve and nurture. Sorry, to serve and nurture, or to obey and nurture. You could use either of those words. And the man's could be described as to protect and provide. And so when you say, obviously it's triggering to think about serving because it creates a hierarchy. I'll come back to the hierarchy part, but just the triggering to about serving. First of all, Jeshua is the servant. I am the servant. There is nothing low about serving. Serving is the highest calling. The highest calling is to serve God. The highest calling is to serve humanity. And so in a family, in a relationship, the highest calling is to serve your partner. Now, if it's both the forms of service, the female form of service is in obeying, complying, being submissive, which, again, the only part of you that rails against that gets triggered by that, is your ego. It's pride. In biblical terms, it's modern women's pride. I would call it just narcissistic ego, where the natural female solipsism of self-centeredness that women have because they have to be mothers, so they only have to care about themselves, because if anything happens to them, their baby dies. That's why women are solipsistic, totally centered on their feelings and emotions, and don't really think about what life is like for men. That natural thing has been amplified out of all proportion by 60 years of feminism telling women that they're superior to men, basically. They're the better sex, they've been oppressed, and everything, the patriarchy is against them, and actually if they were free, they would be better at everything. That has just fed women's egos for 50 years. So and that was deliberate. That was what the cultural Marxists wanted to do. They wanted to make obeying your husband, the husband as the leader, and serving your husband, they wanted to make that anathema to women. And they have, and that is what has destroyed the West. They've broken the bond, the social contract between men and women. As he said, women are not slaves. In return for their obedience and compliance and service, they get protection, provision, problem solving, status, etc., etc., etc. So it's not a slave relationship, it's a complementary relationship, like a secretary at work. She gets paid for doing it, and if she doesn't want to do it, she leaves. Same for the woman. So there's nothing bad about service, but the ego rails against it. So that's the first thing I want to say, is that triggering is your ego, because for the ego, service is makes you lesser, demeans you. But that's not the case. It doesn't demean the soul to serve, only the ego. And I would ask you to put yourself in men's shoes. So when your role is to provide and protect, that means you are the one who has to go to war. You are the one that has to die for the woman. You've never heard of a woman dying for her husband or her man, but you've heard many, 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 many times of men dying for their women. So a man could rail against that. So why should I die for her? Why should I give my life for her? You don't hear men saying that, because even though their egos would not want to die, men feel a duty to do that, because women are physically weaker and can't protect themselves from a man that wants to attack them. And so if a man loves a woman, he would happily give his life. That's one thing. Also imagine if you were in the man's shoes where you were expected to literally care for another human being in terms of working in order that they could eat and have a house and have clothes and have the things they want. Imagine if you had that expectation. And again, this is because of female solipsism. You guys never think about it from the man's point of view. You always see yourselves as the victim. Why should I have to obey and serve? Why can't I lead? Why can't I this? Because you don't understand the pressure of leadership and being responsible for protecting and providing and solving the problems and dealing with all the stress that you guys are not nearly as good as dealing with. You couldn't handle it. If most women did the jobs that men do, all the jobs like garbage man and making roads and building buildings and bridges and mining and fishing, all the dangerous, hard labour, farming that men have always done, you would break in two. You literally couldn't do them, but you don't empathise with the fact that it is the man's duty and role to do that. And if he doesn't do it, he's a bad man. He's a shitty man. You never think about it that way. You only think, why should I have to obey and serve? Because your egos rail against it. But think about, and obviously lots of men's egos rail against it as well, and they are the deadbeat dads. They are the men that walk out on their women and children because they can't handle it. In the same way that lots of women can't obey and serve, they can't handle it. So there are plenty of men and women whose egos rail against the sacrifice that is required for a relationship to work. Both people have to sacrifice their egos. And the thing about them, and in the traditional world, most of the time, both sexes did sacrifice their ego because they knew that their relationship was primarily about raising healthy children. So they sacrificed their egoic desires for their children. What's happened since feminism is that feminism has turned women from the selfless, giving, generous sex. You know, women sacrifice their own needs and wants for their children and their husband. Feminism flipped that on its head and made women the most selfish, self-centered, greedy, unempathetic, non-compassionate gender. You're worse than men used to be because of feminism. You used to be better than men in terms of selflessness. Now you're way more selfish than men. And that is why words like obey and service are just so anathema to modern women. But if you look at it in the larger context of the human race, obey and service are just as important as protect and provide. They are just as valuable. They are just as honoured. Women were honoured for doing that and are honoured by the men that they do it for. It's only in the feminist world that it's not an honour to do that. On hierarchies, again, we have this conditioned dislike of hierarchies, as if hierarchies are inherently bad. They're not. The hierarchies of the world, the power hierarchies, which are caused by, basically Satanists and Zionists and cultural Marxists and certain ideological and ruling elite groups, holding on to power because egoically they think they are superior to everyone else, and so they think they should rule. That is the kind of hierarchy we're used to. But nature and the universe is full of hierarchy. There is nothing wrong with hierarchy. There is the hierarchy of atoms, which are embedded within molecules, which are embedded within cells, which are embedded within organs, which are embedded within organisms, which are embedded within ecosystems, which are embedded within planets, which are embedded within solar systems, which are embedded within galaxies, which are embedded within galactic cultures. The whole universe is a hierarchy. Non-duality, the spectrum of consciousness, is a hierarchy, going from the lowest vibrations of fear and unworthiness and guilt and shame and up through self-esteem and love and joy and peace. That's a hierarchy. We're so, and I'm not having a go at you, Emma, but it's just something that I have to live with, is the fact that everybody is wrong. everybody is wrong about almost everything, because our entire society is designed to brainwash people to believe in illusion and to see the false as true and the true as false, and to believe the illusion, basically, to believe in separation, to believe that service is bad and obeying your man is bad and hierarchies are bad. That's all deliberate. That is what the Satanists who run the world, basically, the people who create wars and satanic rituals, and basically the whole world is designed around producing loosh, which is the food of the interdimensional entities that we know as demons, archons, and the same people that basically torture, rape and kill babies. All of the world is designed to produce loosh, which is basically human suffering, human terror, horror, fear, guilt, shame, etc., etc. All of the emotions that come from identifying with the ego are farmed by the interdimensional demons, and they use the ruling elites, the Zionists, the Satanists, to run the world and produce it. This is a loosh farm, yeah? That's what's actually going on. And so everything that you're taught at school, by your parents, by the mainstream media, by the education systems, by the scientific institutions, every ideology, all of it is of the world, and therefore it is the opposite of the kingdom, and therefore it is the opposite of that which brings the good, the true, and the beautiful. It is the opposite of God. It is the opposite of love. It's all wrong. So anything you believe because the world has taught it to you, or your ego believes it, is wrong. That's why the whole of the way is about unlearning every thought you've ever had, every thought you've ever held about everyone and everything. That's what it says in the introduction to the way. If you truly want to be what God created you to be, you will lay at the altar of your heart everything you think you know and everything you think you need. This is why I post what I post, to point out that it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. Your understanding of the world should only come from one place, the still small voice of your heart, the Holy Spirit. That is the only reliable guidance in the world. It's within you. And a true, genuine spiritual teaching like the way. I would put it above the Bhagavad Gita and all of the Tao Te Ching and all the wise spiritual teachings of the East, because they were written a couple of thousands of years ago for the consciousness of humanity a couple of thousands of years ago. The Way of Mastery and A Course in Miracles were written for the consciousness of today, and they include all the you create your own reality, The Secret, all the modern quantum physics understanding that we create reality as we observe it. That's why it's the best spiritual system, because it is updated and it takes into account modern human consciousness and the modern human world. So, and I know you do, Emma, but really and truly, guys, you should forget everything you think you know and everything you think you need, and just keep studying and practicing the way. It's all there for you. And the way basically exists to guide you back to yourself, to guide you back to the Holy Spirit's guidance, to guide you away from the wrong voice in your head, the one that you do listen to all the time, to the still small voice of the heart, the one that you can and do listen to, but can and should listen to much, much more, like all the time. And it should be the only voice. That's the ultimate, for it to be the only voice you listen to, and you never listen to the voice in the head anymore. Because whenever you're triggered, whenever you're in resistance, it's because you are identified with the voice in the head and the ego, which is prideful. It wants things the way it wants them, because it believes it's a separate self that is full of fear and needs to protect itself and needs to project judgment onto the world if the world isn't doing what it wants it to do. That whole way of living from the ego is what you're asked not to do on the way. The way Jeshua puts it is, You are asked to do only one thing: to live as if you are not an ego. That's the only thing you need to do to practice the way. Live as if you are not an ego. And what's the easiest way to do that? Don't believe yourself. Never listen to the wrong voice. Never listen to the unconscious compulsive thoughts in your head. Never. Never listen to them. Never justify your judgments. Never justify your interpretations. Never justify your stories. They will arise, but just recognize them for what they are. It's just programming. It's just fear. It's just the conditioning of the world. It's literally the world living in your head, trying to get you to confirm and affirm the illusion of separation. That's all that voice is about. You need do nothing means you need to do nothing. You need to spend as much time as possible silently resting and abiding within, with God, with soul, with spirit, with the witness, with radical inquiry, with making home in the breath, with all of the practices, and throughout your day with the living meditation. So washing up, doing the laundry, whatever you're doing in your chores, do them in a state of presence and witnessing. Cultivate nothingness. Cultivate a quiet mind. Cultivate presence, because it's in presence and mindfulness and witnessing that you can feel, because you don't really hear the Holy Spirit. You don't hear it like a voice in the head. You don't hear it like a voice. It's a sense, a felt sense of knowing. It's a felt sense of knowing what to do next. Do I turn left or right? Do I choose this or that? That's all it is. It's just a felt knowing of what to do next. It doesn't tell you about the past. It doesn't tell you about the future. It just tells you about this moment now. It guides you to do exactly what you're supposed to do right now. And the only way you can really be guided by the Holy Spirit is to be in a constant state of presence and inner stillness. As long as that voice in the head is chattering away, you can't hear it. So your main goal should be to cultivate interior silence, interior stillness, so that you can hear the right voice, so that you can be in your right mind. When you're in your right mind and listening to the right voice, life is easy. It's easy, and it's full of all the things that you love. It's full of joy, creativity, play, love. It's full of all the good stuff. In fact, the bad stuff that everybody dislikes only exists when you're in your wrong mind. It only exists when you listen to the voice in the head. If you don't listen to the voice in the head, you will have nothing to complain about, nothing to fear, and nothing to doubt or regret. So given that, please welcome being triggered. And I'm not saying you didn't do that. It sounds like you absolutely did, Emma. And I don't want to punish you for being honest about your triggers. I'm not punishing you. I'm just elaborating and clarifying that the journey of being triggered by life is the journey. And the way to embrace those triggers is to always return to the truth. Always return to the truth of your oneness, your unchanging, unchangeable, unchanged oneness with God, your ever-present enlightenment, your true nature as Christ. Always start from there. Let that be what you navigate life from. You have to navigate life from, I'm already Christ. I'm already enlightened. You can't get to enlightenment and you can't get to Christhood, because that's where you started, and that's where you will always start. So if you think it's something you need to get to, you will never get there, because you are affirming the belief in separation. You must always start with, I and my Father are one. There is only God. God is but love. Therefore, only love is real. That must be the foundation that you approach each moment with. And the simplest way of doing that, I like to simplify things, is to bless every moment, to embrace with love every moment, in faith and trust that you are indeed one with God. and that God's love is infinite, eternal, unconditional. Faith and trust in each moment, so that your heart is open, so that your field is open and not contracted in fear. And so when things happen, you are able to absorb them rather than contract like a scared animal or a scared child, which is what we do. We go into scared animal, scared wounded child, if we are not practicing the way. And as I can see from your message, you are practicing the way. And I know that you've done it many, many times, as have you all. You have all demonstrated your ability to choose love in the face of pain and fear. You have all demonstrated it multiple times. So I have no doubt you can do it. I just sometimes feel that you don't understand that that is the only thing you should be prioritizing. Anything else you prioritize above the moment-to-moment choice of love over fear is illusion. It's not important. It's not valuable. Nothing is valuable except your relationship with God. And your relationship with God is lived in the moment, and your relationship with God is the choice of love over fear. That's it. Keep it simple. Realize that that's the only thing you need to think about. If you're going to think about anything, think about, am I choosing love or fear? Am I present? Am I listening to the voice in the head, or am I listening to the Holy Spirit? That's the only thing you need to think about. Because if you get that right, everything takes care of itself. The way we tend to live, though, is to try and take care of all these millions of variables and control our lives from the ego, which can never work and just creates more stress and fear and doubt and worry and problems. So forget all that. If you're practicing the way, you don't live the human condition. You are in this world, but you are not of it. You are of the real world, of oneness, of unity, of awareness, of consciousness, of spirit. You are of the real world. You're bringing the real world into this illusory world. So you don't live like human beings have always lived. You live like masters live, like saints live, like mystics live. That's how you live now. And that means you forget all the stuff the mind is telling you, and you focus on this moment now. Am I at peace? Am I present? Am I guided, or am I thinking? And I'll leave you with this, my favorite all-time teaching of Jesus, which again, if you remember this, you'll be fine. If you remember and embrace and live this, you'll be fine. Not just intellectually, but really live it, embrace it as your foundation stone of navigating life. If you are not happy right now, you are needlessly enmeshed in your psychodrama. Lots of love.